Every country has a story, right? A biography written over decades. But where do you find the most honest version of that story? Well, we're going to argue that it's actually hidden in plain sight, in a nation's budget. Today, we're telling India's economic story, all the way from grains to gigabytes.
Is it told through its giant monuments, through its leaders? Maybe it's art. What if I told you the truest autobiography of a country's hopes, its fears, and its ambitions is something you'd probably never think to read?
That's right. A national budget isn't just some boring spreadsheet full of numbers. It's a declaration of priorities. It's really a map of where a country has been, and it's a blueprint for where it wants to go.
Okay, so this graphic right here is our roadmap. It traces the whole history of India's budget through 5 totally distinct phases, and each one reveals what the country was focused on, as told by its finance ministers. So let's walk through it chapter by chapter.
Our story kicks off in 1947. You've got this brand new nation facing these just monumental challenges. The first chapter is all about survival and building a foundation, literally from scratch. So in these first 2 decades, the priorities were about as fundamental as they get. First, just holding the country together after the absolute trauma of partition. Second, and this is super important, this is where the grains in our title comes from, was achieving food security. The nation had to be able to feed itself. And third was the Plan era, which was this very top-down socialist approach to building the big stuff. Heavy industry, dams, steel plants, the literal bedrock of a new economy. But, this inward focus on just building things couldn't last forever. The outside world kind of barged in, and it forced a major pivot. India had to shift from proactive planning to reactive defense. All of a sudden, national security just shot up the list of priorities. And at the same time, new domestic concerns like social justice and rural development started demanding more attention and, of course, more resources. So what caused that shift? 2 major wars in the 1960s. They completely reshaped India's budget, and they made national security an urgent and very costly necessity. The country was basically forced to adapt to these huge external threats. But while the nation was reacting to all that, a much deeper economic storm was brewing. You know how every great story has that one true turning point? That moment where the old way of doing things just isn't possible anymore? Well, for India's economy, that moment was a full-blown crisis. The year is 1991. India is right on the verge of economic collapse. Its foreign exchange reserves have pretty much dwindled to nothing. I mean, enough to cover just a few weeks of imports. The country was backed into a corner. It had to change, and had to change fast. The finance minister at the time, Dr. Manmohan Singh, just captured the spirit of that moment perfectly in his budget speech. He said that no power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come. The old model was broken, and a new idea's time had definitely arrived. And what was that idea? It was liberalization. Now, in simple terms, it just meant dismantling that old plan-era system of government control, which was known as the License Raj, and opening India's doors to private enterprise and the entire world economy. It was a complete reversal of the path they'd been on since 1947. Now, this wasn't just some single policy change. This was a total economic overhaul, and it was done under immense pressure from global institutions like the IMF. It meant creating a new tax system, making these huge structural reforms, and critically, opening the doors wide to foreign investment. And tucked right in there is the seed of our modern story, unlocking the knowledge economy. So what did this new blueprint create? Well, it built Chapter 3, the New India, an era that was defined by technology, by infrastructure, and by a whole new kind of growth. The results of liberalization were tangible. First, the infotech revolution just exploded. You had budget speeches specifically acknowledging the power of IT hubs like Bangalore and Hyderabad. This is the gigabytes part of our story really coming to life. But this growth wasn't just in the cities. There was a massive push for rural infrastructure. We're talking roads, housing, electricity, all to connect the entire country. And there was also an acknowledgement that this rapid change needed a safety net, like agricultural debt relief programs for farmers. And this visualizes that pivot just perfectly. The whole economic engine of the country shifted away from state-owned heavy industry and toward a dynamic, private sector-led IT and services economy. The transformation is absolutely undeniable. This brings us to the most recent phase, where the conversation has evolved way beyond survival or even simple growth. It's now about aspiration, about defining what a modern 21st century economy looks like, with a far more complex set of priorities.
Today's priorities are just so much more complex. That gigabyte revolution has matured into the digital economy, but now we also see these ambitious new goals: building smart cities, focusing on green growth, and investing in social progress through concepts like Nari Shakti, or women power, which translates to dedicated funding for women's development and empowerment.
So, the crucial point here is this: the journey we've just traced is a profound transformation. We've gone from the foundational need for grains to the modern ambition of gigabytes. From an economy that was focused on survival and self-reliance to one that's built on aspiration and global integration. The story of the budget really shows a clear journey from just securing food to building this massive digital economy. So the question this whole timeline leaves us with is, what priorities are going to define the next chapter? What comes after gigabytes?